it is possible to layer up our objects. So we could have a stack that's made out of other objects. And I want to specifically make a card deck, and a card deck actually behaves like a stack. So we're going to have objects that are cards, and those will be built up into a stack of cards. So for example, if you push, that's very similar to adding something to the top of the card deck. So you can push again. And then if we pop, that could be the same as dealing. So we could pop one card off, and then we could pop another card off, and then another card, and then another card. And that would be the same as dealing for out of our deck, which would be a stack. So where we would start is we would start by figuring out how to code our card object. So our card object will take a look at one of the cards and see what's stored on them. So it's got like a picture, and it's got a number, so you can have 1, 2, or 3. It's got a name, this is a Mackie roll, and it's got some kind of a message about scoring kind of in the corner here. And so those are the things we're going to need to store for our object. So I would design my class, and I would start by making my instance variables. Now the thing about the little card that I had there, I actually had 4 variables here, but it turns out that the image and the message are actually dependent on the name. So I actually only need 2 things, and I can just return the other 2 pieces of information. So I've got my number and my name. I'm going to make my default constructor so that the user could call either the default constructor or the constructor where they pick. They would choose which one they wanted to call. And then I'll make a series of accessors. And I'm actually not going to make any mutators, because the way that this card game is going to work, like they don't get to go in and change the card if they don't like it. They just get to see what they've got. So I'm actually not going to put any mutators in at all. And then I have 2 more accessors where they get the picture number, and that's going to be dependent on the name, and where they get the message, and that's going to be dependent on the name. And this kind of code would be something you'd think about for the card that you were trying to make. Then I'm going to develop my equals method. I'm going to make sure that both the name and the number are equal to return true, and then I'll make a compare to, and the compare to, I'll start by comparing the name, and then I'll compare the name and the number, and I'll do equals and there. So first I'm going to sort by name and then by number, and that's how my compare to method will work. So now I'm going to make an ADT out of that object that I've just coded. And I'm going to make my stack of cards. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plunk in my stack object. Then I'm going to change the name, possibly. That's possible, you don't have to. If you decide to do that, you're going to also change the name of your constructor. And then you're going to change all instances of the word object to whatever the heck my object's actually called. So in the stack class, the default stack class, you can see there's a bunch of objects in there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find all of those, and I'm literally going to search and replace it to become sushi, because that was the name of my class. Sometimes, but not always, but sometimes I choose to also change the name of my stack. And if I do that, I also have to change the name of the constructor. I normally do that when I have like 12 stacks already in there, and so I need to know which one was the sushi stack and which one was the other card deck stack or whatever. All right. So then I'm going to need to write a third class, and the third class is going to call those other 2 classes. So I have my object, that was sushi in this case. I have my ADT of objects, that was my stack of sushi, that's going to be the card deck. And then I'm going to have another file, which is going to be my game, which is going to run it. So in that other file, I'm going to make a sushi stack. And in that, I'm going to add some of those little sushi cards to my sushi stack. And that's how I'm going to build up my card deck. So here's what it would look like. So in my main method, or in the onCreate maybe, something like that, I'm going to create a new stack, and then I will add some things to it. So if I created my new stack, there it is. And then I've created, right in this line here, I've created this Mackie roll, because if you recall, the constructor created a Mackie roll of 2. And then in this one here, I've created a chopstick of 1. There we go. And then what I do to add them to the stack is I'm going to go push N. So there we go, that gets added, N gets added to the stack. And then I'm going to go push N2, and that will add N2 on top of it in the stack. So I can create some new objects by doing it that way. So I could declare the object, and then push it onto the stack. Or, and this is the way I frankly prefer to do it, I can create the object and push it on the stack all at once. And that's what this next line does. So this next line creates this egg nigiri, I think? I don't know. And it adds it right onto the stack. So then what I can do with my stack is I could pop the top thing off the stack and I can save it in the temp variable, and then I would be able to print out its name, for example, or something like that. So I hope you can see how we would create the stack and push some things onto the stack and then pop things off. So your final project has two options. It could be a project that is a grid game, or it could be a deck of cards. And the deck of cards has a lot of advantages. Frankly, it's an easier project. And the other thing that's really cool about it is you're using an ADT and an object, and that's very impressive. So if you're thinking of building resumes and things like that, it's nice to have used some of these things before because they're considered very difficult. So here's an example of one. So there's this card deck and it's called That's It. And what happens is you would read down a puzzle like something that has a string attached. And then everybody in the crowd guesses what the heck it is. So they might go a balloon. And the first person to say yo-yo, the thing that happens to be on the card, you go, that's it. And then they get a point. And so the cards, which are going to be on our stack, are cards like this. They put out the clue and then we would check our answers. So here's another one. It's called Speedy Words. This one actually has two decks. It has a deck with a category and it has a deck with a letter. And what you have to do is, because this is orange, you have to name a flower that starts with an R, like a rose. And so when the student coded this one, you can see they've got the category and then they've got the letters over here. So you have to name a food that starts with A. And the way that they coded it is they have 4 players at the bottom, so whoever can name a food that starts with A first, you'd click on them, and they clicked on 4 here, and then they get a point added to it. So this little game has the cards that flash up for you, and then it keeps score for you as well. Here's another one. So there's a card like this, and a dice. So this is actually going to have 2 objects again. It's going to have this card deck and a dice object. And then you roll the dice, and it says name a movie with 1 sequel. And then in the way that they had coded this, there's 2 players down here. And so this one was name a word with 2 vowels. So whoever got it, looks like it was Nancy, you'd click on them and that would also keep score for you. And so that's how their game works. We have a series of cards and we also had a dice object as well. Here was another one. There was a series of card objects you could get and also a dice object. So the 2 dice objects add the vowels, and then there's a series of cards. You try to form a word out of this, like, I don't know what. I really don't know what. Him. H-I-M. And then you'd click on the things to form a word, and then you would get a score based on how many points you'd get on the word. So on the sheet, what I have you do is on the first 2 sheets, I have you first we're going to make a flashcard object. And a flashcard object has 2 numbers, and the default constructor will just generate you 2 numbers. And then the other constructor, what they did is they took a range so that, I don't know, the little kid could learn small numbers, they could learn big numbers, and so you can put a range in there to build the question. Then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to have a get question, and it's going to be printed out in this format. So that would have us putting the 2 numbers in, then a plus sign, then an equals. For the new question with a range this time, it's going to be very similar to this code here, but we're going to put the range in so that it will give us 2 numbers with a range. So then check answer will get their guess. We have to check and see if the guess is equal to those 2 things added together. So if it is, we'll return true, otherwise we'll return false. So we've got a constructor, an accessor. That looks like a facilitator, and facilitator. So now we're supposed to make a stack of those math questions. So we're going to take the stack class and we're going to highlight all the objects and switch it to be math question because that's the name of our class. Then the next thing it asks us to do is in the 3rd class, so first of all we had the math question class, then we have the stack class, and then we have this 3rd one where we actually make the stack up. What we could do is we're going to add some new questions. So one way we could add a question is we could call this one here, we could call this constructor, so that requires that we pass in a range. So this will give us a range of up to 6, and we'll add that question directly on the stack. Another way we could do it is we could call our default constructor, and so that's going to give us a range of 5. And so this question had a range of 6, but this one's just going to have a range of 5. Another way we can do it is we can first build a math question. This one has, I'm calling this one here, so I'm saying its range is going to be up to 25, and then I take that math question and I add it to the stack. Another way I can do it is I can call my default constructor, so that's going to get me a question whose range is up to 5, and then I can push that one on the stack. And here are the 4 ways that you could push something onto your stack. So let's look at question 2. This one is simulating a printer queue. So what we first need to do is we need to fill in the printer job object. So it's got a file name and a time that it was added to the queue. So in our default one, we'll assign in something into the file name and something into the time. And in the other constructor here, we're going to assign fn into file name and t into time. So to get the file name, or set the file name, we'll go file name equals fn, and to set the time, we'll go time equals t, and get the file name is return file name. Okay, so then to get the time, we'll return time. Equals, we're going to check and see if the file name equals j's get file name, and time equals j's get time. Where was I here? All right, so time equals time. And I actually did something cool here. That is a Boolean expression, so it will evaluate to either true or to false. So you can be a little sneaky and just put return, and if it's true, it will return true, and if it's false, it will return false. So it's a way of being a little more efficient and avoiding an if. And then my compare to method, so I have me, and then the j time, and that will go in there, and j get time. So if I'm smaller, then it'll be -1. If we're equal, it'll be 1. And in this last case, I'm bigger, so it'll be a 1. And then we'll have the toString. So it's got the file name, and then was added to the printer queue at blah, blah. So then this time I had a queue because it's a printer job being added to the printer queue. So I'm going to need to go through and find all of the objects, and there's actually a few in this. There's one more. And then I'm going to need to change them all to be printer job because that was the name of my object. Then I can add, using those 4 different routes, I can add different printer jobs there. So here I've added the default one, but here I've added the other one, default one, and I've added 4 print jobs to the queue. Good luck with your sheet.